Thank you all for coming. I'm so excited to share my project with you. So it's titled Cabaret's Buddhist Hells and Psychedelics. Yes. It's titled Cabaret's Buddhist Hells and Psychedelics, comparing Sally Bowles and Jean Ross in an unconventional performance. And Sally Bowles is the central character of Ken Arnett's 1966 Cabaret, and several of the source texts that it came from. I'll do a 10-minute oral presentation afterwards to give you all more context about the research and the process of putting all this together. But enjoy, and I'm excited to present after. Above and Up performance takes place.
Swatika, a mark of well-being, the footprint of the enlightened, the symbol of the sun, and the signature of the devil. Which is more terrifying to you? Its mirror image or its tint?
MC grins and freezes. A large banner of the swastika drops center stage and lights up on Aldous Huxley at his typewriter, writing the letter.
To make this mundane world sublime, just half a gram of thaneraphine.
Spotlight on MC widens to reveal buffalo horns upon his head. He is Yama, the lord of death in Hinduism. He is in a Hindu temple holding the Abhaya Mudra, a pose of blessing characterized by a raised right hand. Worshippers surround him.
He's not wrong, you know.
Huxley is now writing a manuscript for his novel, Brave New World.
The warm, the richly colored, the infinitely friendly world of Soma Holiday. How kind, how good-looking, how delightfully amusing everyone was.
Soma, the elixir of the gods. What is it? Some call me Soma.
Enter a worshipper who bows before Yama.
Yama!
And most call me Yama. But then again, what am I? Death itself? No, I am a camera. Heard that one before?
Spotlight on Christopher Isherwood at his typewriter, exit worshiper.
I am a camera with its shutter open, quite passive, recording, not thinking. Recording the shaving man at the window opposite and the woman in her kimono washing her hair. Someday all this will have to be developed, carefully printed, fixed.
And how did you record Sally Bowles?
Isherwood stares blankly. MC laughs. The swastika banner center stage morphs into the interior of Fraulein Schneider's apartment, where Sally Bowles and Christopher Isherwood are currently living. Lights up on Sally, who stumbles into her apartment after her abortion. Weak and feverish, she collapses onto the sofa in the living room.
And now, the toast of Mayfair, Fräulein Sally Bowles, coming straight from the clinic.
Welcome and bienvenue, welcome. On cabaret to cabaret, on cabaret.
Isn't she beautiful?
Sally pauses, realizing something is off. She is dreaming.
Come taste the wine, come hear the band.
Where am I?
Come, the horns are celebrating. Right this way, your table's waiting.
Yama pours Sally a chalice of soma, an ancient Indian ritual psychedelic. He offers it to her.
Come taste the wine.
Sally drinks the soma. Blackout. The MC places an easel downstage on which he places a placard reading "The Hell of Revival." Spotlight on Sally's center stage. We are in her mind.
Let me teach you how to make a prairie oyster.
MC places a cup in her hand.
My father used sewn cups like these. Fine crystal. Only the best of the best for my family in the protectorate.
Enter a figure from Sally's childhood in Egypt, briefly entering and exiting the space.
Assalamu alaikum!
Walaikum assalam. The golden Egyptian sun. And then they sent me to Surrey.
MC forcefully cracks an egg into the glass.
I've always found chicken eggs most fascinating. They have the potential to hold such life, and yet, when all is done, you're left with nothing but a shell.
Sally tosses the shell to the side and MC steps on it.
They tried to crack me at that school, and I mean, I guess in a sense they did. I was 16 years old and I loathed that school. And don't get me wrong, darling. I might have thought I was stupid, but it takes a bit of genius to make a good prairie oyster. I'd finished all the coursework necessary for the 6th form at 16. I was also pregnant. Believed it? So did my headmistress. Well, it was about the only thing I could do to leave that cursed place. The headmistress said that a girl who could even think of anything so disgusting couldn't possibly be allowed to stay on and corrupt the other girls, so I got my own way. Quite like a chicken egg, I suppose. You really would think I had a baby in me.
MC plays a cymbal crack. Sally studies the glass again.
We have glasses like these at the Kit Kat Club. Fine, delicate, rosy, Lulu, Frenchy, Texas, Fritzy. and Helga. But you know all about that place. You take a fine glass, add a little Westchester sauce, and muddle it the fuck up.
MC adds Worcestershire sauce to the glass. He grins. The sauce is reminiscent of brown liquor or bitters, the current currency of the Kit Kat Club.
And then we drink the elixir of the gods.
The soma suddenly takes great effect with great intensity. The space becomes filled with psychedelic patterns and distorted visuals. Yama is now visible to Sally.
Hello, Sally.
Hello. Have you come to take me?
No, you have come to take me.
Where are we going?
You have a performance, don't you?
Oh, well, I guess I do.
We better get on with it. The cabaret doesn't wait for anyone.
The two walk off stage, blackout. MC replaces the placard with another reading, The Hell of the Black Thread. Spotlight on Sally in the Kit Kat Club, clad in a revealing dress with black lines. She is mid-song.
Continent of Europe is so wide, my man.
Enter MC. A banner displays the outline of Europe. MC approaches it with a paint bucket and brush.
Not only up and down,
MC
but
paints the
side-
vertical half of the swastika over the continent.
but side to side, my man.
MC paints the horizontal half of the swastika, completing the symbol. A symbol crashes into MC grins, and exit MC and spotlight once again on Sally.
I wouldn't ever cross it if I tried, my man. But I do what I can, inch by inch, step by step, mile by mile, man by man, by mein lieber Herr, farewell, mein lieber Herr. It was a fine affair, but now it's over. And though I used to care, I need the open air. You're better off without me, mein Herr.
Applause, and Sally takes a seat at a table with Chris. The psychedelic landscape is constantly in flux, growing, shrinking, disappearing, creating, destroying.
Do you ever just wish you could tell the truth?
About what, Chris?
I just wish this wasn't all just a show, or an illusion, this
Maya?
cabaret.
Ah, he won't call it that until much later.
Tell me about it, Chris. But you have to admit, you're not removed. You're just writing the character and I'm performing it.
Sad.
Sally?
Sally morphs into Christopher's unnamed male lover. Is this the real Sally?
I wish I could just tell the truth.
And what do you do instead?
I write.
And that isn't your truth.
I don't know. I mean, it just feels like no matter how deep I dig, I can never really get to the truth.
Male lover morphs into Swami Prabhavananda, Ishavar's guru in his later years. As Christopher continues speaking, he starts lowering to the ground and sits cross-legged to receive Swami's teachings.
The truth is Brahman, Christopher. Sat Chit Ananda.
And I feel like I'm so close to understanding it, but there's too much going on behind the scenes.
Swami turns it into Sally.
Of the cabaret?
Of the cabaret.
Why, Chris, darling, I have the most delightful story to tell you.
The whole room shifts into something like a cabaret performance, except Sally is narrating and playing the goddess Kali, Christopher is playing Sri Ramakrishna. MC walks in front of Christopher and swipes Vibhuti on his forehead.
Sri Ramakrishna was the most fabulous man. You would have loved him. Well, it's not like I technically knew him either. He was a couple of acts before us in the cabaret. Before Sally, before Jean, before all of it.
Chris sits in deep meditation while Sally monologues.
Here's how the story goes. I'll spare you the excessive details, but Sri Ramakrishna was a priest at a temple for the goddess Kali in Calcutta. You have letters to your mother, don't you, Chris, dear? You talk to his mother all the time. How's your relationship with your mother?
I do love her very much, but I don't know. Sally, I sometimes can't tell if I think I hate her or if she hates me. And all the while, I can't tell if the feeling is real at all.
And what do you do about it? weapons, Chris. Or shields. Whatever you want to call them, they're all the same in the end.
Sally pulls out a cigarette and lights it.
Well, anyway, Chris, Sri Ramakrishna. A monk named Totapuri came to instruct Ramakrishna in the Brahman, which is beyond all forms and aspects. As he tried to meditate, the figure of his adorned goddess Kali rose before him, creating the illusion of duality. At last, Totapuri picked up a piece of glass from the ground, stuck it between Ramakrishna's eyebrows, and told him to fix his mind on that point.
MC places a dot of kumkum at the center of Ishwar's forehead.
When Mother appeared,
Ramakrishna said later.
I drew the sword of discrimination and cut her in half.
Using the letter, Chris slices his conception of Sally in half as he says this. Chris disappears. Now there is one actress playing Sally and one playing Jean. Blackout. MC replaces the placard with another reading, The Hell of Crushing. MC brings Sally to Fräulein Schneider's living room. She is surrounded by MC as Fräulein Post, Isherwood, and Fräulein Schneider.
Ah, very good news. You know Herr Schultz around the corner, yeah? He sells those exotic fruits and pineapples and such.
Yes, has something happened with him?
Indeed, Herr Bradshaw, I am to be married to him soon.
But Fräulein, that Schultz is a Jew, you know. You must not marry such a man.
Oh, yes, but Fraulein, I didn't know you.
Did not know that. That Jews are at the bottom of all this trouble. That Germany must come first.
Fräulein,
Such times we live in. It was bad during the war. Then they promised us it will be better. You know they've just closed the National Bank. There will be thousands ruined. I shouldn't fund. It is the Jews. I know it is the Jews. And now you are married.
You have a lot of nerve speaking to Fräulein Schneider in such a way. How dare you? I've seen that parade of soldiers through your flat. Can't you see how happy this engagement has made her? Who the hell do you think you are standing in the way of that?
Who are you?
By some force, Fräulein Post's voice pushes Sally to the ground, a type of violence we know her to be capable of, but rarely see.
It is people like you and Herr Bradshaw who are ruining the world. Unprincipled drifters who call themselves artists, never make use of anything, and then vote labor on the slightest provocation. You live in foreign countries, and you let yourself get involved in obscure political issues that are of no concern of yours.
Ishwood grabs his typewriter.
Unprincipled drifters who call themselves artists. Obscure political issues.
Yes, they are!
The three close in on Sally, beginning to physically crush her, grinding the truth out like in a mortar and pestle. Throughout this, Sally struggles to break free.
You will never understand what it means to be German, to experience all this, to be threatened by the Jews thing. And now when we live here,
You will never understand.
Is that as easy to say? Easy for you. Fight. And if you fail, what does it matter?
You will never
You
understand.
pack your belongings, you move to Paris, and if you do not like Paris, where? It is easy for you.
So what if I don't understand?
So what?
Maybe I want to talk about all of this. They always ask me questions, but they never want to know about the unemployment, or the poverty, or the Nazis marching through the streets. All they want to know is how many men I went to bed with.
You will never understand.
They asked me if I was a feminist. Well, of course I am, darling. They don't think that feminism is about sex, do they? It's about economics!
you will never understand.
Sally breaks free from the crushing down volumes and runs off. Fräulein Schneider and Isherwood disappear. MC remains, and Jean enters, distraught. MC replaces the placard with another reading, The Hell of Wailing. Chaotic hellish yell slowly makes into Cat Club sounds. The wailing cry of Jean's anxiety is mixed with the deafening roar of a typewriter telling her and retelling her who she is. Yama circles Jean, a shark circling his prey.
Breathe in,
Jean breathes in and the room breathes in with her.
breathe out. Why don't you care about the Nazis, Jean?
As Jean answers, she wails, growing louder and louder as her identity becomes more and more diluted. Mysticism.
Not true, I'm a communist. Oh, did Chris care?
Red, like the blood on your hands.
No!
performance many times, but who is the performer?
Jean, Iris Ross. I am a writer for the Daily Worker.
Ah, so you write too. Quite the ritual.
Oh, but I tell the truth. No, I write about war, about films, about the Soviets.
You are both armed with the title.
Yes, but where is my work?
Where is it, Jean?
I don't know.
Keep going. Who are you?
Oh, Sally Bowles, the priestess of the Cabaret.
You conduct the rituals. You invoke a powerful name. But whose?
The formless, the shapeless.
The unexplainable. Quite like yourself, I suppose. The Indians use the word God and priest interchangeably.
Jean and Young glance at one another.
Sally Bowles. The woman who was almost a mother, the woman whose life is worth a bloody fur coat.
Young is taken back. He often challenges her, but this is still a trip, can't go down the dark spiral.
The priestess of the cabaret. Let's see a ritual, shall we? And now, meine Damen und Herren, Mesdames et Messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, the Kit Kat Club is so happy to welcome back an old friend. I give you the toast of Mayfair, Fräulein Jean Ross.
I used to have a girlfriend known as Elsie, with whom I shared 4 sordid rooms in Chelsea. And she wasn't what you'd call a blushing flower. As a matter of fact, she rented by the hour. The day she died, the neighbors came to snicker. Oh, that's what comes from too much pills and liquor. But when I saw her laid out like a queen, she was the happiest corpse I'd ever seen. I think of Elsie to this very day. I remember how she turned to me and say, "What good is sitting alone in your room? Come hear the music play. Life is a cabaret, old chum. Come to the cabaret. Put down the knitting, the book and the broom. Time for a holiday. Oh, life is a cabaret, old chum. Come to the cabaret. And as for me, I made my mind up back in Chelsea. When I go, I'm going like Elsie, stood by, admitting from cradle to tomb. It isn't that long a stay. Life is a cabaret, old chum. Only a cabaret, old chum. And I love a cabaret.
Blackout. MC replaces the placard with another reading, The Hell of Scorching. Spotlight on Jean sitting at a bar.
I know what it feels like to burn. A chamber, a stage, a crucible. I have seen the fire penetrate the deepest layers of the souls around me. I didn't always know this feeling, but it's second nature now. Oh, a spot of gin, please, and for you.
Young pulls out a syringe. He is the god of death, after all. The bartender hands Sally her gin. She takes a sip. Simultaneously, MC turns around and injects himself in the syringe.
It burns. And does the burning ever stop, even in death?
Perhaps, Jean, but many worship fire.
Jean pulls out a lighter and lights a cigarette.
You do too. Fire is God, no. A body in a funeral pyre, a lamp offered to the Almighty, a cigarette. Sure, it burns, but perhaps the scorching is an act of purification.
Jean looks at Young.
Maybe, in a perfect world.
And what world do you live in?
Well, my offering was the fireplace in my headmistress's office. It was the longest 30 seconds of my life, and what would the outcome be? This fire was offered to no God, Yama. I mean, so what? If I made up a pregnancy, you're telling me I have to suffer if I'm not pregnant and lie about it, and if I really am pregnant and don't want to be? Chris might think I'm some elaborate metaphor, some symbol of militant bohemia.
Why do you reject that, Sally? Did you not come to Berlin wanting that for yourself? Sure, you may not snack on rose petals and chloroform in ether, but those emerald green nails mean more than red ever did. Or did it?
Sure. That's my story to tell, not his.
And you're telling it now, aren't you?
A shattering of what Jean knows to be true. We get to see who she really is now.
I guess I am.
Jean pulls out a pair of scissors and cuts her hair. She throws it in a nearby bin and burns it, a nod to the superstition of the South Indian Alabama tribe regarding Yana and burning hair. Yana immediately disappears, spotlight on.
What does hell look like to you? Sartre thinks it's other people. And to an extent, I agree. The Hindus think you keep coming back again and again. And the Buddhists think it's, well, something like this. I'll tell you what hell feels like. It's your complexity, wasted away. Your memory, living through things you don't even quite want them to. Rewale anahabu anta ya habibi salama. What I just said doesn't make a bloody drop of sense. It's my line from a bloody awful film called Why Sailors Leave Home. And it's some of the only memory of me out there. And so does Sally Bowles. It's only politics. What's that got to do with us? Hell is the place where you find the girls whose balanced meals are flowers and anesthetics, liquor and cocaine, prairie oysters, where death comes to play.
I'm impressed, Jean. Very few know that burning hair keeps me away.
Jean smirks and looks at the bartender.
Another spot of gin before I go, darling.
The bartender hands Jean a shot. Just as she takes it, blackout. MC replaces the placard with another reading, The Hell Without Interval. Spotlight on Yana.
Kalam. Time.
Yana makes ticking sounds with his tongue. Lights up in Fraulein Schneider's apartment. We see her putting things away, tidying, retidying, cleaning at varying speeds. Sometimes she's going a mile a minute, and sometimes she's barely moving at all. Her movement corresponds with Yama's tone clicks. Fraulein Schneider begins humming the tune to So What.
Are we a slave to it, or is it a slave to us? How much does it matter beyond the value we give it? Like money, if we decide to burn it all up, who's to say we can't?
As Yana says this, we see a flame. Sally lights a cigarette. She inhales, she exhales. Schneider continues humming. She inhales, she exhales. Isherwood begins typing away at his typewriter.
Drifting in this euphoric state. Morning can wait. Let it come late. Why should I wake up? Why waste a drop of the wine?
Come taste the wine.
I am an actress in the cabaret. I am Sally Bowles, the actress, the character.
MC has spread a large sheet of white paper on the ground and places a bucket of red paint center stage. Schneider's work preparing the space is done. She exits. Jean stumbles in.
You have blood on your hands, Sally Bowles!
Sally and Jean are drawn by some gravity to sit atop the sheet of paper. Both dip their hands into the red paint and begin painting on the paper in their own separate worlds.
I'm Sally Bowles. I have blood on my hands.
Isherwood is in a trance. He types away as he repeats the following line while Sally and Jean paint.
You have blood on your hands. You have blood on your hands. You have blood.
Did I ever ask to have blood on my hands?
For the sun will rise and the moon will set, and you learn to settle for what you get. It'll all go on if we're here or not, so who cares? So what? So who cares? So what?
Oh, it's all wrong.
For the sun will rise and the moon will set, and you learn to settle for what you get. It'll all go on if we're here or not, so who cares? So what? So who cares? So what?
It will work out. It's only politics, and what's that got to do with us?
For the sun will rise and the moon will set, and you learn to settle for what you get. It'll all go on if we're here or not, so who cares? So what? So who cares? So what? So who cares? So what? So who cares? So what?
MC continues taking with his tongue.
So who cares? Who cares?
Sally and Jean get up and stumble away looking for a door. The twisted organic painting turns out to be a swastika, but it's a mirror image. Sally and Jean each find a door, stage right and stage left, respectively, and walk through it. Spotlight on MC. He draws a circle around the swastika. It resembles a demented clock with a broken and mirrored arm and hour hands. MC continues ticking with his tongue and carries the paper off. Blackout. MC removes the easel downstage. Lights up in Fräulein Schneider's apartment where Isherwood sits at his typewriter. Sally and Jean enter both week after their respective abortions. Their entrances are mirrored stage right and stage left, almost identical to Sally's entrance in the prologue. Isherwood types away at his typewriter every time Sally speaks.
You know what I love?
A spot of gin.
We've got some, don't we?
I mean, I think one must.
First thing in the morning, how about a prairie oyster?
Sally and Jean grab their respective bottles of gin, contemplate for a moment, and place them back down. They peruse the kitchen for ingredients and make prairie oysters for themselves and Christopher.
But you're still leaving, aren't you, Chris, dear?
Yes, Sally, I'm afraid I must. But it won't be forever. I will see you again soon, I hope.
My one regret is I honestly believe you have been a wonderful father. Perhaps in another life you truly did take my hand in marriage. That would have been terribly thrilling, wouldn't it have?
Christopher stops typing.
I say, Chris, did I ever shock you the way I spoke?
Not a bit. No one ever shocks me when they try to.
I guess I do try to. I did tell Fritz my mother was French. I'm a bit mad like that sometimes, Chris. You must be patient with me.
Christopher embraces Sally, and when they separate, Isherwood's typewriter disappears. Sally morphs into Isherwood's male lover. Then morphs into Jean. Enter the MC.
And now, meine Damen und Herren, Mesdames et Messieurs, a special song written just for Jean Ross.
As the music plays, Isherwood and Jean slow dance. Gradually, a pair of buffalo horns appear atop Isherwood's head. By the end of the song, they're fully manifest. Spotlight on Christopher, now with buffalo horns atop his head.
The camera's taken all its pictures, and now it's going to develop them. I wonder how she will look when I've developed her. I haven't gotten in for her yet, but there probably isn't one. She'll just go on and on, as she always has. Somewhere.
Lights up now on Christopher and Sally.
Goodbye, Chris. Dedicate your book to me.
Christopher looks back. He will do far more than dedicate this book to her. He closes the door behind him. Sally takes a seat at the sofa in the same spot where Yama brought her into a dream earlier. Jean sits next to her. Sally pulls out a cigarette. Jean pulls out a lighter. Sally lights the cigarette and takes a puff. Passes it to Jean. The two make eye contact. Blackout. So let's just get right into it. I want to give you all a little bit of an introduction about myself. So I spent most of my childhood in Singapore. I grew up in a South Indian home. Our ethnicity is Tamil. And I grew up we were a moderately religious household. I would go to the Hindu temple every now and then. But this is some pretty important background for when I talk about the style of the piece in a second. So I went to George Contini last year wanting to direct Cabaret, as it was my favorite musical. And he's, I think, sensing my inclination towards like experimental theater, like wanting to research, he prompted me to embark on a CURO project. And that's when I began to look into the controversy behind the character of Sally Bowles. and how she compares to her real-life model, Jean Ross. So I began by wanting to make a project about that, and at the same time I started reading more into mystical, religious, psychedelic theater, and just those topics in general. So I decided to synthesize the two. And I did receive the CURO Research Award for this project, so that made it a lot easier to do. Cool, so to give you all some historical, political context for the events of Cabaret, and we saw some of this in today's work too. So Weimar Berlin, 1919 to 1933. We're nested right between World War I and World War II. There's massive inflation, there's an influx of tourism, and there's a boom in nightlife. And we see the emergence of cabaret performances. And these are performance-style events that occur in their nightlife scenes. And so you see a lot of images here that pertain to an art movement that happened at the time called the New Objectivity Movement, which really aimed to capture the realities, the human realities of that time, whether or not they were comfortable. So just a fun fact here, you see Anita Berber, she's one of the queens of Cabaret, and her favorite drug was actually chloroform and ether with rose petals mixed in, and she would consume them. So, yes. So Weimar Berlin was very characterized by its drug consumption in its nightlife scene. And just another fact, Weimar Berlin, those cabarets were actually a hotspot of leftist ideology, so Hitler was not a fan. Okay. So, and then you have this New Objectivity movement, and then Christopher Isherwood comes in with his iconic line, "Eye in a Camera," capturing this scene himself in Goodbye to Berlin. And this is where you see the short story Sally Bowles, which is where our central character is introduced. And then she lives across a bunch of other works. So here we see Van Druten's "Eye in a Camera" from 1951. He expands on the idea of Sally Bowles on stage. He takes away a little bit from the political tensions that are explored in Goodbye to Berlin, but we do get more of an emphasis on Sally. We talk about some of her life events, including her abortion. And then Kander and Ebb in Cabaret, they had a musical element to all this. They introduced the character of the MC, who I got to play around with in this project a lot. And there's more of an emphasis on the political tensions. There's a little bit less Sally, but we still get a good amount of her. And Cabaret was the main piece that I focused on for this project as it compares to Goodbye to Berlin. So, here you see Jean Ross, and here you see Sally Bowles. So Sally Bowles has survived across many iterations. Liza Minnelli, Natasha Richardson. Here you see Jane Horrocks, who's my favorite Sally Bowles. And so Jean Ross disagreed heavily with the portrayal and characterization of Sally Bowles. She believed her to be an unfair representation of her, and there are many different perspectives then as to who is the real Sally Bowles as I was going into my research and looking for this. So here's a couple of the perspectives that I encountered. So the first is that Sally is the fulfillment of an unfair and misogynistic literary trope. Jean's daughter, Sarah Caldwell, writes that a woman must be either virtuous or a tart in this trope. So Sally, who is plainly not virtuous, must be a tart. And then another perspective that I encountered is that Sally is an exaggeration of existing elements of Jean Ross. So John Sommerfield was a communist in London in the 1930s, and he interacted a lot with Jean Ross as she was also involved in those activist circles. And he writes in his fictionalized memoir, he talks about this book called A Woman of the 30s, which I think is just a direct comparison to Goodbye to Berlin and how it characterizes Jean. But he writes, "A woman of the 30s made too much of her sluttishness and capacity for self-deceit and the way she made a fool of herself with her lovers." So he identifies those qualities are there, but Christopher Isherwood, or this fictionalized author he uses instead, have really elevated and heightened these characteristics to create Sally Bowles. And then finally, another really cool perspective that I encountered in a personal communication with Andrew Cockburn, who is the stepson of Jean Ross, and actually the father of British actress Olivia Wilde. In a personal communication with him, I learned that Sally Bowles could actually have been one of Isherwood's male lovers, and because of the social stigma at that time, he was not able to admit it, and so personified these elements of his unnamed male lover into Sally Bowles. So there's this shattering of this camera-like objectivity that Christopher comes in and claims to have. Caldwell also writes that Isherwood has pointed out that to be lifelike, it's neither necessary nor sufficient to be literally true to life. So then I started reading more into Christopher Isherwood, and one of the things that fascinated me most about Christopher Isherwood was the fact that he became a Hindu philosopher later in his life. Now, having this background myself, I became very excited to see how I could synthesize the two, because it just kind of felt like it was meant to be. And so I read into his work. He has a book called Vedanta for the Western World, and that's a collection of essays describing these Hindu teachings in English, and that's where I took the part about Kali and Sri Ramakrishna. A lot of those were direct excerpts from Isherwood's work, actually. But after looking into this Dharmic religion thread here, I started to think about ways I could involve our ritual elements that already exist in our performance spaces. So this is my beautiful mother. She is a Bharatanatyam dancer, which is one of the oldest classical dance forms. It came from my state, Tamil Nadu, and that's what Ria showed y'all today at the beginning of my work. And this is Bhutakula, which is a performing form from Karnataka in which the performers actually get possessed as a part of the performance. That's a ritual element of it. And finally, this is Kuriyatam, which is our lovely Dr. Richmond's specialty here. And this is the oldest form of Sanskrit theater, which is also started in the temples. And so when I thought of how I could synthesize Dharmic religion and this project, the question that first came to mind was, okay, so I have Sally Bowles, and she's confronting death after her abortion. Now, what does death look like to me? And to me, death looks like the deity Yama upon his buffalo. And I was inspired by an amusement park that I went to as a child in Singapore. And the entire premise of this amusement park is it's taking us through the 10 different Buddhist courts of hell in this particular Chinese ideology. And these different courts of hell each have a Yama, which is a title, and it's really interesting to see how that deity, as it migrated to China, became a title of the lords of each of these courts of hell. But I became interested to see how I could use Yama in here, and I found a particular perspective on the Buddhist hells that identified 8 hot hells and 8 cold hells. I looked at the hot ones because as this was my debut directing, playwriting, dramaturging, I wanted something that could really, really compel me to make dynamic choices. And I thought the action descriptors of these 8 hells were phenomenal, like scorching, wailing, crushing, and you see how those were reflected in different parts of today's work. So I have this idea of let's put her through these Buddhist hells, and now how do we do that? And in today's Renaissance, with contemporary advocates like Michael Pollan having their docu-series and book How to Change Your Mind, psychedelics totally, we're in a renaissance today. It's making we're seeing a boom in psychedelics, in arts, in popular culture. And I wanted to incorporate some contemporary psychedelic stuff, but also I wanted to identify that India is actually one of the places where a lot of the psychedelics and entheogens that we use today started, including cannabis. And so I looked at soma, which is an ancient entheogen use in India, and scholars today actually disagree on the botanical identity of soma, but it's some sort of concoction that allows the ritual user to experience some sort of psychedelic insight. So I decided to make soma the vehicle, the means by which Sally experiences all of these things. And one source that actually was very inspiring to me with psychedelic imagery was Max Reinhardt's 1935 A Midsummer Night's Dream. And the reason why I particularly liked this source is because Max Reinhardt directed Jean Ross in real life when she was an actress in Berlin. So I thought I could make that cool little connection there. You see some beautiful imagery that I don't know how they did in 1935, but it is truly gorgeous. So now to talk about the rehearsal process a little bit. This process occurred over 10 weeks with 2 hours of rehearsal per week. It was very much a workshop-style rehearsal space, so I would bring in tweak new content every single week. It was very much a clinic in direction, dramaturgy, writing. Thank you, George Contini, you are amazing. I truly learned a lot from this experience. And I would bring a lot of unconventional things to the table as well. Like, for example, we'd be working a scene that I wrote, and I'd say, try this on 100 milligrams of MDMA and show me what that looks like. So we really got to tweak and play with that psychedelic headspace in that way. And another really cool thing that George Contini gave me was composition exercises that we used at the beginning of the research process. And one of those was for the players to create a ritual and for me to see what happens with that. And actually, moments and images from that I used in the process. And that last hell, the hell without interval, was very, very inspired by that composition exercise. So that's something I'll be taking as I move forward in my direction. So some topics for future research. There's so much to keep looking into. Jean Ross, there's not a lot about her out there, so I would love to keep digging, maybe look at and see if I can find some archive with Reinhardt's notes about directing her. That's a really cool avenue we could go through. But also, I think the main elements that I'll be taking away from this project is the unconventional sort of mixture of Dharmic religion and psychedelics, because that's becoming my main focus and my interest when it comes to research. So there's so much to do with that. The world of psychedelics is so expansive, and I really, really look forward to bringing more Dharmic religion and Indian classical culture into our performance research spaces like I